Many applications and services that we use on a regular basis rely on other applications in order to work. For example, if you've ever used the Uber application, then the maps that you see on Uber might be provided by a service such as Google. Or if you've ever purchased something online, then the store from which you purchased might have integrated a third-party provider such as Stripe in order to process the payments. And there are plenty of examples out there where applications need to cross-communicate among each other in order to provide their services. Now, the communication between these applications is usually done using REST APIs. So in this video, we're going to have a look at what a REST API is, and we're also going to have a look at how we can build our own. So quite generally, API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it is a way for different applications to communicate with each other. A simple way to understand this is by looking at an easy example of an API. So you've probably already used ChatGPT on numerous occasions. Here you can see the user interface. In the user interface, we can go ahead and input a prompt, such as what is the capital of Germany, and it gives us an answer, which is Berlin. In this case, we are interfacing with the ChatGPT server using the user interface. In other words, the interface is what facilitates the communication between the user and the ChatGPT server. Another way that we can use ChatGPT is using the API. The Application Programming Interface allows an application to interface with ChatGPT. Take a look at this script over here. This script makes use of the ChatGPT API to send a prompt to the server and display the response in the terminal. You can see here that we have exactly the same prompt, which is what is the capital of Germany. You can also see that I'm saving the response to the variable called response, and at the very end, I'm printing the response into the terminal. And you can see that when I run this script, then in just a moment, the terminal will output the same result that we had in the user interface, which is Berlin. So now in the second case that I've just demonstrated, it is not the user anymore that is interacting with ChatGPT over the user interface. It is instead an application, or more specifically a script, that is interfacing with ChatGPT using something called an API, so a programmatic interface that allows programs to access the capabilities of ChatGPT. Now that we know what an API is, let's talk about what a REST API is. Coincidentally, the OpenAI API that we just looked at is a REST API. But there are also other types such as SOAP APIs, GraphQL APIs, or webhooks. So what exactly is it that makes an API a REST API? REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and it is a set of design principles, and if these design principles are fulfilled for a certain API, then the API is called a REST API. Let's go through these design principles. The first design principle states that the client and server are completely independent of each other. The second principle is statelessness. That means that every request includes all the necessary information for the server to process it. The third principle is cacheability, so either the server or the client should be able to cache the resources that are requested. The fourth principle states that the API calls traverse a layered system that could include things like a load balancing layer, a security layer, or a caching layer. The fifth and last principle states that the interface is uniform, so regardless what client is interfacing with the server, the request always looks the same. The last thing I want to do is have a look behind the scenes. We're going to build a very small and simple version of a REST API so that you understand the underlying functionality. To begin, we're going to install Flask by going to the terminal and writing pip install Flask. And after the installation is done, we have the framework that will allow us to build the REST API. Afterwards, in the editor, we're going to write from Flask import Flask to import the module. Then we can initialize a web application by writing app is equal to Flask and then within brackets name. All we want our REST API to do is return the words hello world whenever we navigate to the root URL. So we're going to define a route to the root URL, And then we can define the function hello, which only is going to return hello world. And then we're going to add one final if statement, which is going to allow us to run the application. Now, when you look below, you can see that it says running on HTTP 127.0.0.1.500. And if we want to go ahead and call the REST API that we just created, then we can go ahead and copy this URL, go to the terminal, where we can type CURL, then we're going to paste the URL, and at the very end of the URL, we're going to write one more slash, so that points us towards the root. And when I go ahead and execute this, you can see that we get the response from our REST API. And at the very top, you can see that it says that the content of the REST API is hello world. But you can also see that we get some other helpful information such as the status code, the date, and the content length. Alright, we're going to leave it here for this video. If it helped you out, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next one.